Hi, I'm Bob Ethington.
And I'm Nick Nicholas.
And this is From Akron and Beyond. Well, today's episode is featuring a real success story of the Akron area, and we're very happy to have on Julie Robbins, what was your proper job title?
CEO.
CEO. Right. That's great. We haven't ever had a CEO on before. This is very exciting. Julie is the CEO of EarthQuaker Devices, which is a company that started here in Akron and has now
worldwide.
It's worldwide. It's huge.
Renowned worldwide.
Exactly. And so thank you very much for being on.
I'm the vocalist for the Bizarros. I know zilch about pedals. I know that it took 40 years for our guitar player to get a case to anchor his stuff down, instead of just having them spread out, but great reputation. Tell us about it. How long have you been EarthQuaker? How long is it?
So EarthQuaker started, I believe this is our 20-year anniversary from when my husband Jamie started tinkering with guitar pedals.
That's Jamie Stillman?
Jamie Stillman, that's right. We didn't file for our name and business proper until I think it was 2008, but we consider this our 20-year anniversary of starting to build pedals. And it really was a hobby that turned into kind of an obsession for my husband. Mm-hmm. And it became a business without us even really realizing it.
Was it word of mouth from the start?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, he had a pedal that broke, and he opened it up and looked at the circuit and got really fascinated because there just wasn't too many components in there. So he started doing some electronic projects and recreating some vintage pedals and then using those as a platform for experimenting with new designs. In the early 2000s, there was a shift and, he really wasn't aware of any kind of boutique or handmade pedals until that time. Mm-hmm. And then started hearing about companies like Zvex or Keeley Electronics that were around during that time. And then there was also a lot of forums online where people would talk about their boutique effect pedals that they found. And he got a lot of traction in those. And then there were dealers that started reaching out to him to pick up the pedals. And yeah, that was, I believe, 2007 or 8 that he started getting checks in the name of EarthQuaker Devices. And then we had to file the paperwork, open the bank account, do all that. And at the time, I was working at what was then First Merit Bank, and would just kind of help out my free time, whether it's be doing the paperwork for taxes and things like that, or helping to assemble pedals, because he really was just pretty well obsessed with it. Yeah. So, started at a very small scale. In 2010, we hired our first employees.
That long?
Wow. Yeah. So we hired our first employees in 2010, mm-hmm. and they're actually still with us today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is really awesome. Yeah. But we refer to these days as the basement days. We first hired Jeff France, which everyone knows as Fedge, and Justin Seeker. And we have a few other folks from this era, this 2010, 2011, Brad Thorla, Mike Stangelo. Brad Thorla does our inventory for us now. Mike Stangelo manages our enclosure production. So we worked from the basement for a few years, and by the time 2012 rolled around, I was working at the bank but could see that there was a lot of potential for EarthQuaker, and that I felt like I could leave the bank, get benefits, work on the business aspect of EarthQuaker to free up Jamie to focus more on the design and production.
Yeah.
So I left First Merit in 2012, and at that time I think we had 6 or 7 employees, and we're doing maybe like $500,000 worth of business. And we moved out into our first outside of the house shop, which we still have today. It's on the corner of Bishop and Exchange. Now we use that space as our studio. So if you see some of our demo videos or EarthQuaker sessions, a lot of those were recorded there.
Okay. Yeah.
Then in 2015, we outgrew that space and moved into our headquarters on Bowery Street, right next to AMHA, which is the site of our annual EarthQuaker Day. And that we outgrew that in 2020, and we bought a third location, and that is over on West Exchange Street. It's the former location of, Sackman Stamp.
Oh, okay.
We bought the Sackman Stamp building on Exchange, and we converted that to our enclosure manufacturing facility. So part of our philosophy is to do as much manufacturing in-house as possible. And so over the last few years, we've really upgraded our technology. So we brought powder coating in-house. We have multiple printers and CNC machines, so we can do every aspect of our enclosure manufacturing and also offer a lot of unique colors and custom colorways or special artwork. And then in 2021, we purchased, was it 21? It might have been 22. I think it was 2022. We purchased a SMT pick and place electronic assembly line.
Okay.
And that was a massive investment too. But basically that allowed us to reduce any reliance on third-party contract manufacturers and do everything in-house. And also it improved our ability to meet demand. A lot of the components that we were using before, through-hole components, are not manufactured readily anymore. So we were buying from like old stock. And during the pandemic, I know everybody heard about supply chain challenges, and we were no exception. So when we converted to this method of manufacturing, the components are readily available, hardly ever out of stock. And then they're also more uniform. So using the old components, sometimes you would get a wide variety in the sound of the pedal because the tolerances on different parts would be pretty different. Now everything is a lot closer to the way they're intended to be.
Right. You want to standardize it more, right?
Yeah. So that, I mean, there's probably some pedals that it's cool that it's a surprise. I know a lot of vintage pedals are that way. But for something that you're buying today, I think you want to be pretty sure that it's going to sound like what you thought it would.
Yeah.
So, that's a little bit of our history. We employ just over 40 people between all of our facilities. The majority of them are in the manufacturing. So everything from powder coating, drilling, printing, soldering, assembling, testing pedals. We also have a marketing department with several videographers and sound engineer, and then an administrative staff with, accounting, customer service, sales, things like that.
And this all just started with you and Jamie. I mean,
that's right. That's right.
Fantastic.
What's really great is, Akron, a lot of people still think Akron is a Rust Belt city, that's seen its better days, but we got so much going on here, we a world-class, world-renowned, manufacturer of pedals, and we had Fred Carmen here, who's, his Hop and Frog Brewery is world-renowned,
Yes.
And then some other older musicians here, I don't know if they remember a device, vintage device called the Echoplex, and that was made in Akron.
Yeah.
That guy was, maybe 20 years ago, he still had parts that people could get from him, the tapes. And then we have that string manufacturer, one of the old B.F. Goodrich, what's that, SIT strings?
Yep.
So, there's a lot going on here.
There really is, yeah.
Well, I'm just struck by the whole way that your company actually got started. I'm hearing like Jamie having a broken pedal and opening it up and, figuring it all out. Now, I'm a drummer, so I don't have any pedals to break, but except for a drum pedal. But I can pretty much guarantee you that if I had a guitar pedal and it broke, I wouldn't even be able to figure out how to open it, much less how to recreate it and fix it. So that in and of itself is pretty amazing, and it's also amazing the whole sort of just energy between you two, because here he is obviously the nuts and bolts guy who has the ideas and stuff, but then exactly what he needs is somebody like you who came from banking.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's just amazing synergy there.
Yeah, we're a good balance for each other.
Right. Yeah. So that is crazy. Now, we typically ask our guests what kind of music they're into, or maybe even more to the point, kind of what music inspired you a long time ago to
You were a little girl.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Well, I think, growing up in Akron, raised
You're from here originally?
Yes. I grew up in West Akron, and with the exception of going to college in Baldwin Wallace and living in Kent for a year or two, I've always lived in Akron. So, and I've almost always worked in downtown Akron too. So I'm a big Akron fan. I really do like it here. It's a great place to live and raise a family. So when I grew up, I was really into classic rock. And then I grew up in, the 90s. I was a teenager in the 90s. So I was heavily influenced by a lot of, they called it alternative music.
Nick was a teenager in the 1890s.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, don't hold that against me.
Well, you lived through the 90s too, so we at least have that in common.
I'm interrupting everything.
I have daughters your age, so I went through all that.
Anyways,
so
continue.
And then when I met Jamie, I really started learning more about underground, indie, DIY, the music scene there, and really got into more experimental and punk music.
Yeah.
But I think, some of my formative years, I really loved strong female voices. I loved Patti Smith and PJ Harvey and Heart and all of those, those bands. I would say that's, I also had like a little baby goth in there too. So I liked all that. Yeah.
And the promise that she is blessed among women.
Yeah. But I think today, it's funny, people will be like, oh yeah, this band, they're so famous. It's like that, all of that is like totally beyond me. Like I'll look at stuff that I'm into. I'm like the 67th person to watch this YouTube video. It's really bizarre how my tastes lean towards the underground and experimental.
I remember one of the first buzz phrases or whatever you'd call it about EarthQuaker was, Paul Simon bought 10 pedals?
Oh yeah, that's a really funny thing that happens to both Jamie and I when people are like, "Who uses your pedals?" and we just like forget everyone. Yeah.
Is it true that did he come to Akron and just specifically?
Oh man, that's been a while. I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember honestly, but we do have a ton of artists that use our stuff. Something that I remember really notably, because I was doing all the order entry at the time, was Noel Gallagher ordered like basically everything. This is when we still sold direct.
That's Bob's
basically
guy.
one of everything. Yeah,
I'm a big unrepentant Oasis fan. Yes.
Yeah. So, but yeah, there's been so many people through the years that I've just been really like. Thurston Moore came through. And he came through with just like indie rock all-stars that I was just like totally flabbergasted, like barely could speak. It's just like, oh my God. Yeah. There's so many people that use our stuff that it's like really impressive.
What strikes me that's been really at the heart of your success has been word of mouth from musicians to other musicians, right?
They talk.
And it's fun. Yes.
Yep.
That is true. There's two right here that are talking. But it's interesting to me because, there's so many people in Akron, unless you know something about music or whatever, it's like my wife says, it's like everybody in the world just lives in their own bubbles, right? And so increasingly that way. And so there'll be people that have no idea what EarthQuaker is, much less
A lot of people.
that it's, in Akron. And then there's people that, you meet that are from England or whatever, and then they totally know who EarthQuaker is because they're rabid fans. So it's just so weird. Yeah.
It really is.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you guys
my
don't-
husband, he gets recognized all over the place. It's really.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, we call it rockrecognized. Yeah, he gets rockrecognized. Yeah, and that is always surprising us that like musicians that we're fans of, we admire, they're excited to meet us. We're like, whoa, this is so wild.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like a star of a very niche group, of people. That's really cool. Does Jamie still playing music a lot?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I assume
he's
he
in
is.
3 bands at the moment.
Only 3. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So they go through periods where they're more active than others. Like in Relaxer, there's kind of a steady stream of paternity leaves for the drummer and guitar player
Right.
having a family right now.
Yeah.
But this weekend, scratch that. He plays bass in a band called Nervous Future.
Okay.
That is kind of the new incarnation of his previous band, Fringe Candidate. There's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a pretty straightforward punk rock band. And then, guitar and Relaxer. And then he is doing some reunion shows with his band from the 90s, Harriet the Spy.
Okay.
He plays drums in that
I
band.
remember that band.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
It's an interesting phenomenon that this is it seems like in every show I always talk about the old days compared to now.
My wife said not to say that anymore. Mention that. Don't refer to it that way.
But in this case, I think it's completely, things are better now, which is that back in whatever those days were a while back, several decades. How's that sound? Is that past muster? Bands were pretty self-contained. I mean, it was like, there were the Bizarros and there was Unit 5. We didn't share musicians or anything. That wasn't happening. Now, there's so many talented people in this area, and they all play. And I have all these different projects. I mean, I just realized last night, oddly enough, that I've been doing music with Jacob Trombetta for 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in that time, I've been involved with him on at least 5 or 6 different projects. And, every time we get together, he's also got 2 or 3 other records he's making that are completely different. And, but he's not alone there. A lot of musicians in this area are like that, and they're able to pursue a lot of different pathways that way. And I think that's
really cool.
I do.
You're talking about being self-contained too, but effects and instrument wise too. I remember Bizarros in the mid '70s. Jerry had a Echoplex, a wah-wah pedal, and a fuzz tone. That was it.
Yep.
It's all he needed.
Yep.
Right. Well, pedals are
Nowadays, that would be considered ultra minimalist. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So I am Bob Ethington with my co-host, Nick Nicholas. This is From Akron and Beyond. We are speaking with Julie Robbins, who is the CEO of EarthQuaker Devices, a very successful Akron company that makes the highest of quality guitar pedals. Do you guys ever think about some inevitable branching out from what you do, or is it you think you're always going to keep your focus on the pedal thing?
We actually are branching out a little bit.
And I don't know. Okay.
Yeah. So we're also releasing some Eurorack modules.
What's that?
So they're modules. So these individual units that you would put together in something called a skiff. And on their own, they don't generate any signal. you need to have some sort of signal generation to run through them. But basically, there's all these little wires, these cables that you connect them together. And it's definitely a smaller niche industry than like guitar players or rock musicians, but it's really interesting. And there's a lot of overlap, like people that are really interested in sonic exploration and manipulating a lot of different knobs and pushing boundaries to get really unique sounds.
Was this something that would be like rack mounted?
Yeah.
As opposed to like on the floor, like a...
Yes. So I'm sure that you've seen it. You maybe didn't know what it was, but if you see something where there's a whole mess of cables and a lot of knobs. So some people, they'll have like a wall of these modules. Other people, they'll have just like a small skiff of maybe 6 or 8. I think that you need at least a few to do anything with it. But you may be passing some sort of like, percussive signal or a keyboard synthesizer, a sample, things like that through it, and then be manipulating the sounds in all these ways. So we have, by the time this airs, we'll have 2 modules out, and we have more in the works. So it's very similar, technology, but not the same exact dealers or users.
Right.
Are some of your products manufactured specifically or recommended specifically for keyboard as opposed to guitar, or is everything just whatever you want to do?
Nothing. Everything is like designed with guitar players as the main market, but what we like to do is show how they can be used on a lot of different instruments. So bass, keys, drums, vocals, harps, harmonica, flute, saxophone. I mean, you name it, we've tried it.
Right.
We just this past weekend had our second EarthQuaker symphony.
I wanted to ask
heard
you
about
about that. I wanted to ask you about that at the Akron
Tell us.
Symphony, right?
Sure, yeah.
So how were the pedals integrated into that? I wasn't sure.
Sure. So the co-composers, this is their second time. So Jake Gunnar Walsh and John Sonnenberg composed the symphony.
Okay.
And they eventually hope to have more. I know that John has ideas for 6.
Oh, wow. Okay.
To make it like a series. But anyways, the first time that they did it 2 years ago, March of 2022, was the first time this had ever been done. And this time, after learning how it was to execute it, they kind of tailored their approach. But both John and Jake had pedals and basically mixing boards. Some of the instruments were mic'd, and they were controlling the level. If it was picking up the microphone, they were running it through different pedals and manipulating the sounds.
Right.
So it was really, really cool. And on Saturday night, it was the final piece. And so we had just heard 3 pieces where the orchestra was sounding like an orchestra would sound, just how you would expect. And then in our piece, you could hear the flute going through modulation. He had a drum on stage that he had removed all of the attack from the drum, and it just kind of made this roar. And it was symbolizing fire. The title of this piece was Conflagration.
Okay.
The previous one was Confluence, so it was more water-based, and this was more fire-based. So it was really cool, and the lighting all played into it. It was really, really cool.
Wow.
There was a incredible cello solo. So manipulating the sounds, they did not sound like your traditional symphonic instruments,
right?
But it was definitely, classical music. It was very romantic and theatrical. Like I could imagine it as like the soundtrack to a film, of some really, I think that's a lot of how John composes and his musical style are these really big feelings.
Yeah.
It was really amazing, and shows you could just use these in all kinds of outside of outside of the box ways.
Sure, yeah, that is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because when I read about it, I just saw sort of the ads and stuff, and I had it like, well, there's probably a guitar concerto or something, but no, this is way more integrative.
So there's
into
a few films on our YouTube channel. There's one that shows the making of the first one.
Okay.
And then there's one that shows the performance.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the performance of the first one is on streaming platforms. The second one will be eventually as well.
Okay, so you get to your YouTube just by putting in EarthQuaker devices?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, people should check that out.
Yeah,
If you put
absolutely.
If you search for EarthQuaker Symphony, you'll find it.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But really,
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is. I was thinking, I'm going to be real highbrow here, Nick, but I was thinking this is like Stockhausen's dream come true, because he was a German electronic composer who was always trying to manipulate and create new sounds. So he would have like a whole piece that would be like a gong played with a feather and with all these huge contact mics on the gong, so it didn't even sound like a gong. It sounded like something you'd never heard before, and that sounds like the kind of thing that could be created here with these.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really cool. Wow. Well, and so you've mentioned EarthQuaker Day, and of course this has become sort of an annual event and almost holiday here in Akron. I guess
I was there. It was like being at a mini Woodstock. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. And tell us about how that started.
Well, we're, part of this community, but we're not like open to the public. We don't have like a retail sales space. And the idea originally came about as like a community appreciation day.
Mm-hmm.
So the Community Appreciation Day open house music festival was kind of the idea behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Also at our headquarters down on Bowery Street, we have a really quiet corner of downtown. We don't have a ton of close neighbors. And we set up tents in the parking lot, bring food trucks to EarthQuaker Drive, our alley adjacent to our building. Set up a tent where we bring a lot of different community vendors. So not-for-profits, artists, other music-related organizations come and set up. We even have dealers come from out of town and set up, like other manufacturers. Paul Reed Smith Guitars, they've been a long-time sponsor of EarthQuaker Day. And it's always a little bit different, but kind of follows that format where we'll have some clinics, performances, shop tours, unique pedal offerings. We'll usually make a whole bunch of one-off colorways or artwork and make those available for sale. So it's always a really chill but interesting day. Some people come and they camp out for the whole day. They're going to watch every performance and do everything there is to do, and then other people pop in and out and take in a little bit of it. But it's always free. It's always the first Saturday of August, and it's always at our headquarters in Bowery Street. So we're just getting started.
I highly recommend people go to it.
It was a lot of fun.
If you haven't been, it's a lot of fun.
See a lot of people, too, that are just wandering around.
Yeah, it is. It's like a big family reunion. We have people that they'll come from all over. We have like this really highly active EarthQuaker owners group on Facebook, and they had a meetup this year. That was really adorable to see them all like meeting in person for the first time. We also usually have a free concert at Musica the night before, and then a free concert at Musica the night of. We haven't booked anything for this year yet, so I can't confirm. But it's likely we will do something like that. But we're just starting the planning in earnest. So there is a website, www.earthquakerday.com, where you can sign up to be on our mailing list to find out news as it comes out. One thing that we're doing differently this year is we're asking bands to submit themselves to perform at EarthQuaker Day. So if anyone is interested in having their band perform, please head there. There's a place where you can notify us of your interest, and then when the application process opens, you'll be notified.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds very exciting.
And it is a paid gig, and you get some EarthQuaker pedals.
Right.
As a little extra perk.
Nice.
And it's always, like I said, a really fun day with an enthusiastic audience. So,
Yeah. When I've gone there, there's always been one band at least that did. It was like a cover band that that actually imitated the band. The one I saw that was really funny was a Hall & Oates cover band, and they all had like Daryl Hall or John Oates wigs on.
Yeah.
And and they nailed those songs. They sounded just like, it was funny. Yeah,
those would typically be EarthQuaker employees.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Doing their own, cover.
Yeah.
We've had some incredible ones. Yeah. Highlights for me were the Fleetwood Mac cover band, Crystal Visions. They were incredible. There was also I love Kate Bush. There was an incredible Kate Bush cover band.
Wow.
Yeah. Samantha Grace.
She did
as
that.
Kate Bush, and
Okay.
she was perfect. I loved it so much. I think I cried the whole set. I loved it that much. Yeah.
I think before we got on the podcast, we were talking with one of Brad's colleagues, Chad Miller, and he was mentioning about how Porch Rocker is just like a couple weeks after that then, right? So August is really a big music month. And
good Akron month.
Yeah.
Akron Music
And
Month.
then the next month, September, is Rubber City Jazz. So,
Yeah. I love those annual kind of things because you can actually kind of plan.
Look
for
forward
them.
to and plan it.
I wanted to ask, but it's kind of a weird question, but you already answered with the module stuff that you guys are doing. How often do you try to come out with, like, say, a new pedal? I mean, is there any regular time frame for this, or is it just as Jamie has an idea and it works out?
It's a process we're always refining. During the pandemic, we were really constrained.
Yeah.
And we were only putting out 2 pedals a year. But that also coincided with our highest sales ever. And I think that was just a confluence of factors.
The pandemic aid, the money that everybody got. They bought stuff.
And there were so many things that weren't available to people.
Yeah.
So going to concerts, traveling, even going out to eat the way that they used to.
Yeah.
And then, the stimulus money.
That's what I meant, the stimulus
that there
money.
was a real increase in people buying just products, home goods, things to use.
Right.
And I think a lot of people invested in pedals and
I
increased their pedal collection.
It struck me as counterintuitive because I thought, well, bands aren't going to be playing shows, so why would they be getting pedals? But on the other hand, guys were woodshedding at home.
18 hours a day, nothing to do but practice.
Yeah, right. Getting new
and pedals are
stuff.
so fun because they can inspire you to write music and hear things differently.
Right.
The pedals that we came out with weren't necessarily the ones that we would have had we had any, like, there were these components that we were trying to use in a pedal, but they were missing another component that we couldn't get until just recently. There was a bunch of designs that have since come out, but we were just waiting until we could get a shipment of these little chips so that we could put them out. So anyways, we were kind of constrained on what we could put out, and so it was just 2 pedals a year. And then last year we kind of did some catch up, put out 6, but they weren't all full releases. 2 of them were limited editions.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of the model that we're sticking to, like a quarterly new release for our line. But we also will discontinue pedals too, so we won't just keep making all of them.
Oh, okay.
And then some of our early releases we're releasing as limited legacy reissues.
Beanie Baby of pedals.
Yeah, that was my title. Thank you very much. Because we'll see, some designs that were from the early days of EarthQuaker. There just weren't that many made, and they're going for a lot of money on eBay or Reverb. And so if we can, we put out a few thousand more of those. We're also, we'll do some special artwork editions. Lots of those have a charitable beneficiary. This year we're working on something to help support the Lottery League. The Cleveland Lottery League is reemerging.
What is that?
It is a charitable organization that organizes a draft. So musicians submit themselves, and then they're drafted into these bands. There's a draft day and a performance day, and then they rehearse and create a new band, a small set. And it's all about bringing musicians together, creating these unique opportunities. This is the first time it's happened since 2019. The pandemic really derailed things.
Yeah.
Bob, have you
But
ever
they're
heard
trying
of
to
someone?
have.
Yeah, I have. I was just going to say that this is sort of what I was talking about with musicians working with other musicians from different bands, but this is kind of taken to the ultimate level, because these are people you probably very likely haven't even met, so it's like getting to, meet a new person as well as come up with new ideas for music.
Wow.
And I always thought it sounded intriguing. I also thought it sounded scary, frankly.
Well, yeah.
I'd be afraid who I would end up drafted with, And,
Well, I think they do really
The
a lot
Korean
of
thing
work.
you're always talking about.
They really do a lot of work to try to make it a positive experience for everyone and provide resources
I'm
to
sure
help.
it's not scary, but
But this year they're
just my
really
neuroticism.
making an effort to have kind of an Akron contingent.
Okay.
There's always been people from Akron that participated, but now they want to make it so that there's some more Akron-centric bands. That way they can rehearse down here rather than trying to meet up in Cleveland.
Yeah,
And
smart.
so it's a really cool concept, and I'm excited about supporting it. I think it's a really cool community building exercise, and that's where a lot of my passion is about building strong community, especially around our music community. So it was a no-brainer for me to participate. So
Sure, yeah.
we're working with a poster artist, Jake Kelly, out of Cleveland, and he's going to be designing a custom avalanche run, which is one of our best-selling products.
Okay.
So that'll be available sometime later this year when it comes to
Well, that's
fruition.
very
So we
cool.
always do
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
We've done some cool things in the past to support the community in those ways. A few years ago, we did one for the Firestone class of 1970. It was their 50-year reunion. I hope I'm getting that right. I could have my years off slightly. But they wanted to do something impactful for Akron Public Schools. And so we did a Firestone Plumes, which is another one of our top-selling pedals. So they had one of their graduates do artwork for it, and then they made the funds from it, which they used to donate to the Save the Music Foundation that funded a art program at a music program at a local elementary school.
So in something like that, once you have the design and let's just say for Firestone High School, then you make a limited number of those, and then they go for they auctioned off or whatever.
Yeah, we're always trying to do things differently to see what works best. And I think what we landed on for this is there'll be like a pre-order window
Okay.
where you can order it, and then there'll be a date that it'll be delivered, and that way we make as many as people want.
Right.
And then maybe we'll make some extra that'll be available at, say, like EarthQuaker Day or something like that. Yeah.
I'm intrigued by when the pedals are discontinued. I bet they immediately become collector's items, right?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're sleepers. I mean, when we first started, we weren't really doing marketing in any kind of meaningful way.
Right, yeah.
We would maybe make one video, and that was kind of it. And I think we were around for at least 5 or 6 years before we made a video of anything. And there was a lot of pedals that Jamie made that he, it was before we were really in this, we're a business. It would be just kind of, this is how many parts he had. So he'd make so many of these, or he was always coming back. So one example of this would be the disaster transport.
Okay.
We have made many versions of the disaster transport. There's been the disaster transport junior, the disaster transport senior. We recently reissued the OG disaster transport.
Okay.
It was the beginning of this whole fascination for Jamie, but only maybe 100 of this variation were made.
Mm-hmm.
And so we reissued that. That was pretty cool. But it wasn't like something that anybody knew.
Yeah.
Like you'd have to be a real nerd to know that even existed before.
Yeah.
So I think
that
people were kind of looking
out
at
there, though. Trust
yeah.
me.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They really are.
Yeah. It seems like almost every guitar player I know has several EarthQuaker
Our
pedals.
Our bass player has one. Our guitar player doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One thing that I think people really appreciate about EarthQuaker is that we have a lifetime warranty, which is very rare.
Yeah.
But I think
Pedals
it
break
helps
all the
build
time.
brand loyalty to us, because something that gets knocked around like a pedal does, you know, first of all, it gets stepped on. It's on the floor.
Yeah.
You know, rattled around in a trunk or on an airplane. There's a lot of opportunities for things to go awry.
Sure.
But, you know, if it can be repaired, then great, you know?
Yeah.
So if you have a pedal that goes down and you're outside of your warranty for like another brand, I don't know how likely you're going to be to go to get that same brand again.
Right.
You know,
right,
you might
right.
not.
Yeah.
So that's been a big part of it. Also, Jamie's design sensibility. I think about half of our line are kind of classics. You know, something that could replace something on your pedal board that maybe you already had, like a big muff type or a tube screamer or you know, a compressor, something like this. That's a firmly established category, and here's his take on it. And people really appreciate his take.
Yeah.
I think he gives a lot of range, lets a lot of the sound come through without making it sterile or pristine.
Right.
So that's a lot of the compliments I hear people really appreciate about his designs. Then another part of our line are things that really didn't exist before. He came with them. So the Rainbow Machine would be an example of that. Or
That sounds great. What is that?
The Rainbow Machine, we call it a polyphonic pitch mesmerizer. It is a really synthetic sounding pedal that at its tamest is a weird chorus. And at its weirdest is like a really synthetic sound that you might think of like unicorns prancing across the sky. But it sounds really cool. And I mean, he uses it heavily in every band that he, you know, like Relaxer, if you've ever seen them play live, they have a extended sonic freak out at the end of songs. And a lot of that are multiple people manipulating their Rainbow Machine, creating this awesome psychedelic wall of sound.
Yeah.
It also sounds totally different if you plug something in that's like percussive. That would be totally give it a different sound, but also awesome.
Yeah.
The Afterneath's another example of that. It's we call it an otherworldly reverberation machine, and you know, more than other pedals that you just kind of set it and leave it on, this pedal is asking to be manipulated while you're playing with it. It makes some really cool otherworldly sounds, and positive things I've heard from a pedal like that is that I plugged it in and 4 hours later I, you know, realized I've been playing, you know, I was so inspired to keep playing and creating and things like that. And wow, really, I wrote a whole record inspired by this pedal, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think we have the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
You know, the classics that whether you're experimental or not, there's something for you, and it's always going to be reliable. And then also some things that you can pick up to help you, inspire you to write some new stuff. And
Yeah. Well, that is a interesting thing I hadn't really thought about, which is that with like guitar pedals, you can get one that is going to be the sound that you want. You know, you've got that sound in your head. You've used that sound before. You want to actualize that. Or you can get a pedal that is totally new sounds to you that inspires you then to, come up with something totally different than you ever would have thought of if it wasn't for that pedal. And so the pedals are almost like synthesizers in a way, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because, certain synthesizers you can, obviously recreate an effect you want, or you're like, gee, I wonder what happens if I do this. And then it's like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to do, I'm going to make a whole half hour of this and make people listen to it. This is From Akron and Beyond. I'm Bob Ethington with my co-host Nick Nicholas, and we're talking to Julie Robbins, who is the CEO of EarthQuaker Devices. So, and we're kind of coming close to running out of time here. So, I guess this is just an open-ended question of where you see the future going. Do you have any? I mean, like you say, we're talking about. I think the pandemic makes everybody a little more shy about planning too far ahead anymore. But where do you see the company in 10 years, maybe?
Something that's a dream of ours is to consolidate all of our locations into one location.
Yeah.
That would be really cool.
When you were talking about that, I was thinking that might get a little unwieldy having 3 different places.
But really want to stay in Akron, close to downtown if possible. But I mean, we don't have enough office space, and it would be really cool to be able to have everything all under one roof.
The way this work from home environment is developed, there's all kinds of space out there.
Exactly.
So the longer, and you know what? The longer you wait, the better deal you're going to get.
Yeah.
It's my my little expert advice is
Thank you.
certified financial.
But there are
Thank you very much.
There's a lot of empty
Well, it would
spaces
be a
in
big
Akron.
project. Involve a lot of planning and things like that. But
Time's on your side.
I love Akron, and I drive by these decaying brick factories, and I think it's a little TLC or total renovation. This could be the factory headquarters of my dreams.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
So that's something that I really would like to aim for. I mean, we're committed to remaining independently owned. It's entirely owned by Jamie and I. No investors or private equity or anything
if that was
like
something
that.
you'd ever think about.
But it's really important to us that we have, the ability to do things the way that we see fit.
That's great.
And, Jamie has no shortage of creative ideas for new pedals.
Yeah. So
I think we'll continue to do that. I would like to diversify a little more, but I'm going to keep that a secret. My passions are...
So far, millions of listeners.
Amplifiers.
We tried that once,
Did
and
you?
that is a totally different animal and not in our wheelhouse, but it was a good learning experience. We'll put it that way. And then, my interests, I really like improving diversity on stages, highlighting voices who are otherwise not heard. So anything that you see me curate or present is going to have a heavy presence of diversity. I really like creating unique experiences, bringing people together for communities. So we're back doing a lot of regular events such as launch parties. The Essential Tremors Festival will hopefully be an annual thing, which is a collaboration between myself and Angus Andrew of the band Liars. He is an old friend of mine. I used to book his band 20 years ago. And he curated the festival, and we hosted it here at Akron. It's also, he's done this in New York, Sydney, Australia, just outside of Beijing, China, and now here in Akron.
Oh, wow.
So really, really exciting and interesting performances there. So, I think that's the plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like there's plenty of stuff on your guys' plate, and a lot of the ambition lives, which is exciting.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Yes, this has been From Akron and Beyond. I'm Bob Ethington with my co-host Nick Nicholas. Our guest has been Julie Robbins of EarthQuaker Devices, and a true, just fantastic success story for an Akron business and startup that has just become globally known. So thank you again, Julie, for being on.
Thank you.
See you.